Yay, look, we're somewhere else. I'm live. I'm at West Tech out in the dyno console. And today we're going to take a look around and I'm going to show you the 4200, which I picked up from Jason over JT Fab. He was whipping up the turbo exhaust manifold, both a naturally aspirated header and a turbo header. That's right. We're going to use a long tube header for both of those. We're going to test it both ways. We're going to find out whether or not it works, whether it adds any power compared to the factory exhaust manifold setup on the naturally aspirated motor first after we get this motor running. And then we will also compare it with boost on a turbo, because I'm going to run this 4200, fingers crossed, everything's working out okay. We're going to run it with boost using the factory exhaust manifold as the turbo manifold, and judging by the looks of it, it's going to work very well. And then we'll get into a whole series of other modifications. But the goal for this trip is to get that thing up on the dyno and get it running. But also, I just finished editing the video. I went over and took a trip to the wrecking yard to try to find a 5.9 liter Magnum, the 360 Magnum, so that I could put it up on the dyno and run a series of tests on that. We want to try all kinds of things with it because I've never run one. Ultimately, I want to compare the 5.9, the 360, to a Chevy Vortec 350 and a 351 Windsor. And we'll try to do a comparison between those, you know, stock and then modified the way that we do. And that way everybody will get to complain because one of them got something and another one got something and they didn't get the same things and yada, yada, yada. Oh, the whole apples to apples and oranges. And but the good thing for me is I got to spend another day out at the wrecking yard, which I love, walking around, looking at all the cool stuff, looking specifically for Magnums. But you know how I am. When I go there, I get distracted. Hey, what's this shiny thing over here? And then we go look at this other cool motor and this other cool motor. And pretty soon it's several hours have gone by and I've looked around and tried to find lots of cool stuff. But I did find Magnums. But the cool thing is, one of the things that we're going to do is with the Magnum, because it is a Mopar, and this whole situation with Uncle Tony and Dulcich and Freiberger going back and forth about this, I just want to test it. What I'm going to do is when we run that thing up on the dyno, I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to flip the pistons, and we're going to see if this pin offset, if there's actually anything to it. And the only way that I know how to do that is put it on the dyno. So we'll run it from a low engine speed, as low as we can, maybe around 2,000 up to 5,000 or 6,000. I'll take the whole motor apart and we'll put it back together after we rotate it so that the pin offset is in the other direction, and we'll see if it changes any power. Now, a couple of things to think about when we're doing that test is we're going to do that, but that's obviously not going to be the only change. We're going to change the piston orientation. The other thing that's going to happen is now the pistons are going to be in different cylinders. So do we have a change in ring seal based on that? Would that negate any of the possibility of the possible increase in power from doing the change in the pin offset? So there really are a lot of things going on here, or even if it's not a lot, it's enough so that we would question whether or not that, you know, it's hard to, when I do testing, we want to make that to be the only change. It's really kind of hard to make it the only change when we're doing this, but you know, I'm going to do what I can. And I like the idea that we're doing with a Mopar, because both Uncle Tony and Dulcich are Mopar guys, and actually Freiberger is a really big Mopar fan too. So, and I actually talked to Dulcich today about this, and he actually reached out to Tony, and I think that, you know, they're not mad at each other. It's not like East Coast, West Coast thing. It's not Biggie and Tupac. It's none of that. It's, you know, I know that the shootout or the build off doing 2-barrel, you know, stock headed sort of stock cam sort of things is kind of, in my opinion, it's a little bit silly, because you can't do two different motors and two different dynos and call that anything. And honestly, I know Dulcich, and I don't know Tony very well. He seemed like a good guy. So, but I know Dulcich, and I know what he did for Engine Masters, and I understand his level of expertise and his level of as how far he's willing to go to do well in that kind of competition. So in a competition, because he uses the dyno and stuff, I think that I would tend to go in that direction. And again, I don't know Tony. Maybe he's really good at what he does, but that's not a competition anyway. Like I said, it's two different motors that are starting out different. and then there's no real regulations, and then they're testing them on different dynos in different states and stuff. So that's not really a good thing, in my opinion. If they want to both get together and do it on the same thing, or two of them that start out the same and test it at the same dyno facility under the same conditions, and there's got to be some sort of regulations on what they can do and what they can't do, because otherwise they're racers and they're going to do everything that they can so that their thing makes more power. And so that, that's it. While it's an interesting deal, and it's always fun to call out another guy, I guess, on the internet, I don't know that that's realistic. But one thing we can do is I can do a video on, hopefully the test goes well and I'm able to take the motor apart and put it back together and not have any problems. And then we can test and see what happens when we change that pin offset. And maybe it does a lot, and maybe it doesn't do anything. And whatever it is, I want to find out. So I'm going to go through all the trouble of getting a motor from the wrecking yard and then doing that test. But the other reason is that's not the sole reason. That's just because we have it, we can do that. What I really want to do is I want to do more Magnum testing. So we want to compare it to the 350 and the 351, but also the Magnum itself is interesting. So we can do testing with that, different intake manifolds and fuel injection versus not fuel injection versus carburation, and also, different cylinder heads and camshafts and things like that. And then also boost. We want to run boost on it. I don't know that we'll have to see how that beer keg, how that Magnum intake, how it performs and where it wants to make power. Because as we know, what's going to happen. You out?
Yeah, I'm out.
All right, T-Dog, we'll see you later.
See you later.
That's Troy saying goodbye. From WestTech, who's awesome, who's helped me out with some stuff. We'll find out if we add boost to it, it's just going to do what it does when it's NA. So if it doesn't want to if it's a really long runner and doesn't want to make a bunch of power at higher RPMs, that's what it's going to do. And it's still going to do that under boost. But having never run one, that's how we find out. We're gonna check it out. I'm curious to see. I'm really kind of curious to see as we go up in power, how restrictive that beer keg becomes. I'm curious to see how big the throttle body is and how much airflow it has and what kind of power level it will support, and when we start to see vacuum in that manifold. I'm hoping that we can hook all that up with Holly and that I can tune it, and that makes life a lot easier when I can do all that stuff, because then I can kind of go crazy on it. We can see where that thing runs out of steam and where it's, if the opening in the manifold is indeed the restriction, then we either have to hog that thing out, put a bigger throttle body on it, put another hole in it somewhere else, put a bleed hole in it, open it up, whatever we have to do. But I'll be curious to see. We have, and I just found it out today, and I didn't even realize it, that WestTech actually has either WestTech or Dulcich, somebody has a 360 Magnum. I think it's some sort of Mopar performance crate motor maybe. But the cool thing is it has a distributor and it has a dual plane intake manifold on it. So one of the comparisons I'd like to do is the big beer keg versus a conventional dual plane carbureted manifold, because I think that a lot of guys would lean toward, with that Magnum motor, they would still lean toward maybe putting a carburetor on it, and I want to see what that does. Aaron, thank you very much. Just remember there are two types of Magnum cylinder heads, crack heads and going to be cracked. Oh, just run them. Oh, so it's either cracked or it's about to crack. So there's no middle ground there. I'll have to check that out, and we'll see. That's a problem on some of the other stuff too. The Vortec head, some of those on the Chevy, some of those are known to crack. Obviously, some of the LS stuff has a reputation for that. So we'll see. And if it's a running motor, that's kind of all I care about. The motor, I want to put it up on the dyno, I want to run it, I want to make sure it's repeatable so that it does exactly the same thing. We'll monitor obviously air, fuel, and timing, and we'll modify the air, fuel, and timing and adjust it until we get basically the maximum power on pump gas. That thing's low compression, so that shouldn't be a problem at all. And once we get that and it's repeatable at running at this temperature and this oil temperature and all of that stuff, to try to make it as fair as possible, because I want to see what the real difference is. And the same thing that when we run an intake test or a camshaft test or a rocker test or whatever it is, you have to make sure that before you change something that the motor has to repeat. It has to keep doing the same thing every time. Otherwise, if it doesn't, then you don't know what the change was. You don't know if the change was from the change that you made or from some arbitrary change. So hopefully we can dial all that in and it will work. You know, the only thing about getting a motor from the wrecking yard is you don't ever know what condition it is, whether it runs or not, whether it's good. And we still don't know that about the inline six cylinder. I'm going to take you guys out there in just a minute and show you the 4200. I'm going to show you the new turbo manifold, and we can take a look at that and kind of compare it to the factory exhaust manifold. You guys can tell me what you guys think of what might be the difference between those two, because I'm going to run them. We'll compare them both NA and under boost, and you know, right away we're not going to run a ton of boost on it because we don't have any. I don't have any head studs, or I haven't changed the ring gap or anything. But we're going to turn it up and see what it does, and then in round two we'll come back and we'll do a ported head, we'll do cams, we'll have some reground cams for them, and we'll have a ported head. And when we do that, then we'll also do ring gap, and we'll do head studs on it, because I've got a set of LS head studs that we'll use for the 4200. So when we seal that up with a new gasket and stuff, and obviously we'll do a quickie razor blade rebuild on that and make sure that all of that's sealed, then we'll be able to get a little bit more aggressive, and we'll, you know, and by then we'll have a handle on tuning it. What does it want for air fuel, and what does it want for timing, and what does it want for cam timing, and we'll find that out NA, and then we'll also find that out under boost. And the cool thing about doing that is, when we get it running and we get it running NA, will the thing want the same NA specs? Obviously not timing, because it's not going to, if it runs at 30 degrees of timing, we're not going to run 30 degrees of ignition timing when we run under boost, but will it want the same cam timing? And the interesting thing is I'm thinking not so much from a boost standpoint, but when we pull the ignition timing back, will that make it want different cam timing? When we have it boosted, the boost thing, I don't know that it's necessarily going to want different cam timing, but that's why we're here. That's what we find out. And we'll do the same thing under boost. We'll start out at a low boost level and a low timing level, and we'll get the air fuel right, and then we'll get the ignition timing right, and then we'll start playing with cam timing, and then we'll start playing with ignition timing and cam timing. We don't have a lot of wiggle room in the ignition timing once we play with the cam timing. And even before that, because we're not going to go up to 30 degrees. We're going to run, you know, I think Calvin is he's running low timing with his. He ran it all the way up to about 19 pounds of boost. And I think on his is unopened, which is what everybody wants. But I think with E85 and having an unopened motor, and he wants to be safe and not break that thing, I think he's probably down in the low, you know, 12, 13, 14 degrees of timing. We'll try more than that on this, especially at the lower boost levels. But once I'm up at 19 or 20 degrees, maybe that's where we want to run it, just to make sure that it's safe before we start doing a big bang kind of thing. Because the problem with this one is that it doesn't want to run, according to the people that we've talked to, doesn't want to run a lot of engine speed. So having not a lot of engine speed to play with means that we are going to make a lot of torque, unfortunately. The other thing, though, that's going to change that is I got the flange, the intake manifold flange, and Jason over at JT Fab, the guy that did the header that I'm about to walk you out and show you, he's also doing an intake manifold. I'm making an adjustable. He's making an adjustable intake manifold. I brought him the flange, and I brought him the tubing that he can weld into that flange, and then I showed him the plenum that we normally do for either an LS or a modular Ford or all these other motors. And it's basically just a flared entry inside a mailbox with a throttle opening on it. And what we're going to do on the throttle opening is, rather than having a dedicated flange like for an LS or whatever, we're going to have a tube coming out of the flange, and then another tube, and then the flange. And then that way I can connect those two together with a silicone coupler, but it allows me to rotate the throttle body flange and kind of put the throttle body in whatever configuration I want. That's more so that it might fit on different places depending on where we have the throttle body mount. Because when we change the length of the runners, I just don't want the throttle body to be in the way of anything or hit on anything. So it'll make it easier for me to orient the throttle linkage as well, which is also good. So let's take a walk out and we'll take a look at that stuff. And then I will get to your guys' questions, but I know that everybody is going to want to see this kind of cool stuff. Let's take a walk over here. See, we got the... So right now, that is the stock intake manifold. We'll come around over here to the good side. So this is the turbo manifold. Right now, and I think he tried to make it as equal length as he could. Right now, it has a 3-inch V-band flange right here. That allows me to put any of the adapters that I want on. I think I have one laying here somewhere. No, that's a T3. That's a T3 to T4. That's the wrong one. But what it is basically it's a V-band to T3 or V-band to T4 kind of thing. Not this one, obviously. But that allows me to mount whatever kind of turbo I want. I can mount a T3 on there, a T4, a T6 if I wanted to get really crazy. And then that's the factory intake manifold. But as I said, Jason over JT Fab is going to, he already did the aluminum flange, which we'll see. You can see we'll bolt on right here. The nice thing is that the injectors are in the head, so making the intake manifold, it makes it a lot easier. And this is the factory exhaust manifold, which is, where do we set that down at? Oh, here we go. So this is the factory exhaust manifold. And we'll use it with this piece of tubing over here. Again, it just ends in a 3-inch V-band. And so what I can do is with that V-band, I can make the exhaust for the dyno, run it NA, and just run it a 3-inch exhaust, which is easy. I can also hook up another, as a matter of fact, I'll show you over here on one of Freiberger's motors, the piece that we're probably going to use. It'll look like this. So this is Freiberger's motor that he just did a test for Engine Masters on. S480 from the guys at LJMS. It's got a Hawley or Hooker, cast iron exhaust manifolds with a cross under pipe. And then this is the piece that I'm going to be using under here. I'll go under here. So this piece right here that has the wastegate, it's an elbow. That's a 3-inch V-band there, and then a T4. So that makes life easy. And it's got the wastegate mount on it. So we'll run a single wastegate on this. We normally run 2 when we do the LS stuff, but I think that 1 45mm gate should be more than adequate. And then we'll run I'll show you guys we'll run this. We've got a TC1 electronic wastegate controller, and then that way we'll have we should have no problem having a nice boost curve and stuff. So hopefully all of that will work out really well. But let me know what you guys think about the turbo manifold, and we'll get to some questions and stuff and talk about it. I'm excited to be down here at West Tech because, you know, it's nice to get actual dyno testing done and stuff. Okay, let's see what you guys are doing. And while I was at the wrecking yard today, I found another 3800. So I want to get a spare. And I also found, which is really cool, I found the aluminum intake manifold for the 3800 in an F body. So we'll try to maybe take that off, and we might be able to use that for when we go turbo on the 3800. When we finally get to the big bang stuff on that, the guys at ATI are sending over the dampener for that so we can put on a crank trigger. Or the other thing that might happen is the guys from Megasquirt, who I'm using to run the 4200, they might have a trigger pattern that would allow us to use that with the factory trigger on the 3800. So we'll see what happens there. But right now I'm going to do the 4200 first, and then we'll get back to the 3800. And then obviously we'll do the K24 as well. So lots of cool stuff. So let's see what you guys are doing here. Aaron, thanks again. I'm scrolling back to take a look at stuff, and I see Aaron, $5. Big win for Aaron. Chris wants us testing to see how close a real dyno to a desktop dyno with the same motor and parts. The problem with a desktop dyno is you can't always get the data that you need from the test motor. It's hard to get a lot of the information that they want. Let's see. Oh, ProCharge Mopar. Uncle Tony said after talking to Dulcich, it's not going to happen. Yeah, I don't think that the competition's a really good thing. I mean, it's not a real competition unless it's done in a structured manner. Let's see. Can you do a dyno test? Can you do a dyno testing a centrifugal supercharger raising RPM with small heads? I don't know what you mean there. So you want to run a small head and then a centrifugal supercharger? We've done that a lot. Yeah, Gran, that's right. Tony's not really a head porter like Dulcich is. Dulcich is really good at head porting. So what did Eddie want? If he wants a cam for a turbo application, I would go small, especially if it's a 4.8. Julius is in the house. Hey, Julius, I found the, if you're interested, I found the intake manifold, the dual plenum adjustable intake manifold for the 464 valve. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Let's see. They should make a West Coast versus East Coast, Tupac versus Biggie theme deal. He's good for TV. Yeah, that would be interesting. If the guys are talking about a small cam for the LS stuff, like for a 4.8 or a 5.3, and you're talking about 1,000 horsepower or less for a turbo, I tend to err on the side of a smaller cam because you can make the power with that and have the thing be drivable and stuff. Yeah, I've never seen anybody be able to tell me on a desktop dyno what a dyno does. That doesn't make it a bad thing. It still works and it still gives you, I think, general trends. It's just that it's not absolute. Let's see. Also, the Speedmaster air gap is the best bang for the buck intake upgrade for the Magnum. Is it really? I want to get an intake manifold, so I didn't know if they had one. I'd like to try it. I don't know where to get a trans build, Dawson. Jack wants to know, are you going to test the 4200 with different turbos? Yes, definitely. We have different turbos, so we might as well try them. That's another thing that's on the list to do, maybe just to show response rates. I'm definitely going to test it with the DNA GT45 because that's a low buck turbo. Actually, I'd like to test it with twins, with 2 of the max speeding turbos, but we have to build a custom manifold for that. John's in the house. Thanks, John. 156,000. Philip, I did spring scan, roller rockers, and push rods plus boost at 800 horsepower. How long will it live? If that's an LS question, it will live a long time there, and I wouldn't do roller rockers on it. What intake should I run on my 365.9 Magnum? You're talking to the guy who's never done any Magnum testing. I've seen them run here, and I've seen them run with like that crate motor. I think way back, I remember seeing them run that with the dual plane intake manifold, and that's typically the go-to thing for a street motor. But you know, if you're running high RPM, then a single plane. There's lots of good SUVs out there. T. Hyman. Springs are picked according to by what your application is. A 560 lift springs won't support a 600 lift cam. 600 lift cam, big duration cam. Well, if it if it coil binds, before 600 lift, it's definitely not going to support those. The duration is another thing. That's for RPM. Let's see how much boost. The stock rods are fine if we're still talking about an LS. Metal specs in the oil. Yeah, that's not a good deal. Calvin's channel, I agree, Chris. Calvin's channel is really informative. He's done a lot of stuff on the 4200, more than most of us. I mean, he went out and ran 9s in it, and that's impressive, especially given the cost of what he's doing. He's definitely doing it low buck, which is cool. Lane wants to know, I was just wondering how I might control boost with a supercharger. The pulleys should already do that. You don't normally run a wastegate unless you spin it up and then have a blow off valve. The other way that people do that, like on positive displacement blowers, and we used to do this on the Kenny Bell stuff, is you just open the bypass valve. If you open the bypass valve, you normally knock about 5 pounds off of it. Eddie, I'm running a stock 5.3 with the turbo. That works good. Like if you take a look at the last video, you can see that running a stock 1 stock cam and boost works really. The Ford 335 series Cleveland heads are all that's needed for performance builds. For any motor, you just put them on a small block Chevy too. I'm sure that a lot of the small block Chevy guys back in the day wish they had Cleveland head flow. Yes, make sure you hit the like button. We're 277, man. Come on, you guys can just hit the like button. Karen's in the house. Yes, that's a long tube header manifold, but we wanted to make it a long tube header for the NA thing, and I thought that it would work well on the turbo deal. I mean, we might lose some heat energy, but we'll see. It's really pretty thick wall stuff, so it should stand up to the heat and should last. But it'll be interesting to see how it compares to the stock exhaust manifold, which is cast, either cast iron or cast steel. And so it's going to retain the heat pretty well, and it's shorter. So it'll be interesting to see if we see a change running the same turbo with one setup versus the other to see if we have a change in response rate. Eddie, is your daily driver have boost in it? Let's see, Eric, I have a 427 LSX with a Dragon Slayer crank from Callie's. Everything else is billet and made by Callie's or Crowder. It's built to handle 40 pounds of boost and over 2,000 horsepower, but how far should I take it? Well, given the fact that we take stock stuff to 1,500, all of that stuff should, if you have the right, do you have the right block? If you have a, is it an LSX block? The block would start becoming the limiting thing with all of that. Fascist pendant. The flip piston test is a waste of time. The only gain you can get is more piston slap. But you don't understand that getting more power might not be the only goal of the test. Finding out if it works or not is the thing. And we want to show that it either does or it doesn't, or that we have more stuff to argue about. Either way, it's a win-win-win. The 4200 ICT car guide, the 4200 is very tall. There's a lot of height there. I don't know if it would fit in a Camaro or a Mustang. What does Calvin have? He's had a couple of his. What does he have? One in a Fairmont, in a Fox chassis car, and then he has one in a Studebaker or something. Play around with compound turbos and twin charging on the 4200. We won't do twin charging on the 4200 because there's not a readily available supercharger deal for that. and we don't really need to compound turbo that thing. I don't know that we'd ever put a big enough turbo on there where we'd need a second small turbo just to get it spooled up. I mean, the goal for me would be, the ideal thing is that the 4200 makes 1,000 horsepower, and I'm sure that it can. So we're just hoping for the best. So you guys are talking about different ways to prepare squirrels. John, what have you started? Julius, I don't think that the 3800 has anywhere near the cylinder head that this motor does. The problem is that there's not readily available heads that flow. I think a fully ported set of 3800 heads may just flow what this stock head flows, and not even probably that much. I mean, it may be way behind now that I think about it. Found a killer article on a 300 horsepower plus 2.2 with all factory parts from a 95 Mopar magazine. Yeah, you could get 300 horsepower with the stuff from the Mopar performance catalog. 4200 versus 3800. Who has better head and stud combination? Is there an engine you don't like? The head clamping arrangement for boost. A lot of people talk about that. As a matter of fact, I remember when that was a discussion way back when the 5-liter Mustang became really popular, and all of the guys were saying, "Oh yeah, but the Chevy has 16 head bolts, and the Ford only has 10, so it's going to lose head gaskets." Well, that's not the reason that they lose head gaskets. Mostly it's tune, and then it's deck thickness. The problem with a stock block, a 5-liter block, is it doesn't have a lot of deck thickness, and a lot of guys would go, "Well, I'm going to go to 1/2-inch head studs in my 5-liter Mustang." That made it worse because all you do is tighten it more and it distorts the deck more. So that's not good. Having deck thickness both on the block side and on the cylinder head side is a good idea and really helps. And I don't know that if you look at the power levels that we've made with LS motors, which have the same number of head bolts as a 5-liter Ford, I don't know that that's the thing. Frank wants to know, hi, how does primary tube diameter affect back pressure and the turbo spool? It can help reducing back pressure a little. Normally, I had this conversation with Brian the other day, with Brian Tooley the other day. We were talking about turbo stuff, and also Jimmy from HP Performance. I think we were having this conversation, and that's that usually the thing that is the biggest restriction in the exhaust flow is the hot side of the turbo, and not so much the tubing diameter or the header or the Y pipe. When you get a big turbo that flows a lot, then you can get into that other situation where maybe the Y pipe size is a problem. But then if it is a problem, do you trade off response rate for ultimate flow like you do when you change the AR and a turbo and stuff? So I think you can get into those situations. I think that the testing would indicate when that happens, when that crossover point happens. Dulcich is friends with Tony Mammo and Dr. J. Yeah, and I don't honestly think that Dulcich needs either one of those to do what he would need to do, and especially with a Mopar. Like if you had them both do, I was going to say if you have them both do a different motor, but Dulcich is really pretty good at porting. Have you ever had experience with Canfield small block Chevy heads? I don't think I've ever run a Canfield small block Chevy head. We've run lots of Canfield small block Ford heads, and I've run Canfield big block Chevy heads, but I don't think I've ever done anything with their small block heads. So, ICT car guy. So that's John with the thumbs down. John, I am still doing the piston thing. Yeah, I just want to see what happens. I have no vested interest either way. My vested interest is only that we show what happens. If it's yes, I'm going to be the first guy to jump up and down and call yes. If it's no, I'm going to be the first guy to jump up and down and call no. The thing is that I don't even know, and I suspect that this is what will happen if we don't see a power change. Then I think that there might be people offering reasons for why there's not a change or why we cannot test it or detect it. Cam selection for an L67, ported M90, water to air, ported heads. All of that is good, but porting the M90, even a Gen 5 one, I know guys are getting fairly good power out of that, but not anywhere near what you can get with the turbo version of that. Montana's in the house. Big Sky. Yeah, Dulcich doesn't seem to use a lot of Magnum stuff. He's more LA guy, and really I think more big block stuff, although he just did a slant 6 too, which was cool. Paul still wants to see the 4200 tested with. What's the deal, Paul? Why do you want to see compound turbos? What is the deal with that? What do you think that benefits? Utah wants to know what happened to the LSA supercharger. I've never run an LSA supercharger. I've run a Cadillac supercharger, and I haven't rerun it. I just need to fix the belt assembly so that it doesn't slip, I think. Can you make over 1,000 horsepower on pump gas with a 427 LSX? I think you could, because a 427 should make a lot of power NA. And especially if you did it at a reasonable compression ratio and then did turbos on it, I think you could get pump gas to get up there that high. Portugal's in the house. Wow, you're way out there, man. Welcome. Can you run DOD with a stage 2 cam? You'd have to have a custom one ground. Because the problem is that the DOD lifters want such a soft ramp rate that the ones that you're running DOD on would have to have a different cam profile than the rest of them do, just like on the factory cam, because the factory cam is different. They're not all the same. The lobes that are non-DOD lobes are different than the DOD lobes. Let's see. I got to say, I normally get depressed watching diluted car content. I've always wanted to be able to do dyno testing comparisons as real data. It is. That's why I like it. I let the dyno tell us what's going on, not the other way around. High RPM NA motors. What do you recommend? I recommend that you don't listen to me. I don't run a lot of those. 8,000 RPM is kind of as high as I've run stuff on NA motors, and there are guys doing lots more than that. It's so easy to make power with boost that I don't. And Dulcich or Brule yells at me all the time. Oh, anybody could do stuff with boost. You need to do it with just a motor. And I'm like, yeah, but you're always going to lose when you race against somebody that has boost. Because even if you did get 1,000 horsepower from an NA, like Big Block, for instance, is what the one he's always talking about, which is not hard to do. You can certainly do that, and I've even seen guys do that on pump gas. But when you do that, you can do that with a 5.3 and a turbo or 2 turbos. It's not hard. Anyone got a Terminator X running on a 4200? I have never seen that. My last car did 980 on the motor. That's good. Say what springs you use on the 4.8 turbo, looking to do something like that. There's lots of good springs for that. We run the 918s a lot on stuff. I can't remember what's on the 4.8. We put some kind of dual spring on it. I think that they're BTR springs, because we ran a bunch of different cams when I was doing the sloppy stage 2 versus the world. So I think we put real springs on it. Tight LSA on a supercharged motor. Yeah, you can do that, Simon. I like that better. I don't like a wide LSA on a positive displacement supercharged motor. On a centrifugal motor, they always do that. It's more like an NA cam. But a tight LSA on a supercharged application is going to help improve low and mid-range power, which all of the wide LSA stuff, all the blower cams, all the PD blower cams are all kind of soft there. D-Train, the LS7 lifters are good. You can use link bar stuff, but a lot of guys use the LS7. I don't know how much, you got to tell me how much kind of power you want to make. I'll tell you what turbo that you can use on that. Simple mods, are you going to boost that J series? If you're going to boost it, just get the cheap one. Richard, do you know what cams you're going to be getting from Schneider? Also, thank you for the link to Calvin's channel. I'm glued to the 4200 stuff. Yeah, I know he ran 9s. That's really cool. I don't know what cams yet. We'll see. I'd like to try, and I might even try 2 sets, but I don't know. Aaron wants to know, in a 5.8 liter multi-port fuel injection, would you use an aftermarket GT40 style intake or a single plane? It depends on what RPM range you want to run your 58 or your 5.8 liter. The long runner stuff like a Trick Flow or a Holley Systemax or an RPM 2, those work really well for like up to 6,000. If you're going to go beyond that, use a single plane with injectors, but you're going to lose low speed power with a single plane. Gene, I don't see what you're trying to do with your truck. Let's see. Is a Chevy 4.3 even worth building? You can take a look. I would add boost to it. The thing is that you're going to spend money on the 4.3, and it's never going to make what a V8 does. So a lot of guys just swap them. So Eric, the 427 is an LSX block, but it's a stock C6 2006 with a 1300 horsepower clutch. So you think your clutch is going to limit you? So I wouldn't go crazy with the clutch. You know, if that clutch is going to be a limiting factor. Also, do you have everything else? Is the transmission up to that, or the half shafts up to that? Is the drive shaft, all of that stuff? Can you do a test between a standard small block Chevy or Ford and one that is race tuned with all the tricks, stepped headers, balance, camshaft, super light, rotating, something? That's a really, really involved testing if you want to go from a standard kind of build and then to a Engine Masters level or full race style build. For one thing, I don't build race motors. I did Engine Masters, and I know what goes into that. It took a lot of time and a lot of testing to figure out what worked and what didn't work for a particular application. And that's what happens on these race motor deals. I can tell you that the difference between a race motor and your typical street or performance motor is dramatic. It's a lot. I mean, take a look at the motor that Ben did over at EFI, and you can see, I mean, he was going beyond 10,000 RPM and making specific outputs that are tremendous. So that level of stuff is a whole different level. Do you have a part number for the crane cam you tested against the LS9? I don't know which test that was, because I've run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cams, and really there's more hundreds for me to say, but I just stopped saying them. Richard, have you talked about header sizing? I've run tests both NA and supercharged on the normal size for headers. You know, inch and 5/8, inch and 3/4, inch and 7/8 for most stuff, and then bigger than that for some of the LS stuff. And the bigger header on the really high horsepower supercharged stuff seemed to help a little, but the differences are not what people think that they are. I remember posting the test on some header testing that I did, and you know, it hurt some feelings because guys were saying, oh, if you step up to this inch and 7/8 header, you're going to pick up 30 horsepower. Well, you didn't pick up 30 horsepower from the header compared to the stock exhaust manifold. So you're not going to pick up that kind of power going from one size to another size header. And when you do pick up power, it's going to be in specific areas, and you're quite possibly going to lose power in other areas. And then the actual design of the header, the primary lengths and the collector style and the merge and all that also play a huge factor, as much or more than the primary diameter does. What is the factory valve angle for a small block Mopar head? I honestly don't know. I don't know what that is. Yeah, Flexall, I've only ever seen one Dodge V10 in the junkyard, and the one that I would want is the SRT10, you know, the Viper-ish style one that they had in those specialty trucks. That would be the go-to one. Racing, we have done some of the lightweight stuff, the lightweight flywheel, the lightweight drive plate, the lightweight crankshaft. All of that stuff helps. It all makes power. Like I said, when we were doing Engine Masters, those are all things that we had to look at. And everybody that was at the higher level in those competitions did all of that. You have to do everything. You have to do all of the lightweight stuff. You have to take all the tension out of the rings so that they're not really street rings, which is what they were trying to promote that thing as, but none of them were. None of them had piston rings that you would actually use on a daily basis. You have to do oil drain back. You have to do everything. We tried different style and shape gaskets. We tried, you know, putting different patterns on the camshafts on the long runners and the short runners. We tried different rocker ratios on the long runners and short runners. We tried different spring rates, all kinds of stuff. And all of that is, you know, and that's not even at the level where, like I said, where Ben is over there with the stuff that he's doing. It's a lot of stuff. Boosted Lifestyle, I've been trying to get my hands on one of the motors. I just don't want to pull it out myself. Which one are you talking about? And also welcome. I'm excited about running the 4200. I think it'll be cool. I don't know that it fits in a lot of stuff because it is fairly tall, but I think it has. And I was just talking to my buddy Gary Sheehan today, and we were talking about, I was explaining to him of this motor and about how we think it's maybe the equivalent of 2JZ or maybe the equivalent of a Barra in terms of, you know, if you look at a lot of the specs, like particularly the head flow, you know, if you look at a 2JZ, what it has is a ton of block strength. And I don't know that this aluminum motor has that. But this aluminum motor in terms of head flow has more than the 2JZ does. And then the 2JZ, to make power, you need obviously different camshafts in it, just like this motor, you need different camshafts. And this one has more displacement. So theoretically, it should start out making more NA power than a 2J does. I just don't know if the block will eventually take the kind of crazy power levels that a 2J does, or for that matter, the Barra as well. Yeah, if you guys haven't been able to take a look at the video that I'm going to post, I'm done editing it now, and I'm going to put up the video from the wrecking yard. And one of the motors that I stop at to take a look at is that 4.9 liter, the 300 inline 6-cylinder Ford. That's definitely on the list of ones that I want to do. Oh, boosted, your local junkyards are too pricey. That's bad. I mean, and I kind of see with more of these kinds of videos that people are doing that they're just going to raise their prices. It's unfortunate. So how is did you get rid of the 8 turbo deal? Are you still doing that? Did that go by the wayside? I saw you got some love from, what is it? The girl that does the supercar stuff. I can't remember her name. Supercar Blondie or whatever. David wants to know, my first legitimate question, what do you think about the blueprint engines like the $600 or $6,000 400 cubic inch? Well, that's the motor that Chad used in Daphne's wagon, who passed away from cancer, and we all miss her and love her. And he used that blueprint motor, and they ran it on, I think, Drag Week or Rocky Mountain Raceway or whatever. And they drove it all over the country and ran a bunch of nitrous on it, ran multiple stages on it. And then he came back, and we did that fastest car deal because I helped him put a Procharger on it, and we made 1,000 horsepower with it because we put a trick flow heads on it and a bigger cam and stuff. And it makes good power, and it's lasted a long time. Flexall, the guy broke the world record for horsepower with 12 psi. I don't see how that could be a world record. You can, David. You can skip all the learning. Crate motors are a good thing. That's why they're so popular, is because people don't want the hassle of having to put something together. The easy button is you just push the button and give them your credit card, and you order a motor, and it works. Well, Boosted, we'll let you know. I'm going to run that 4200, and hopefully we'll have some fun with it. It'll be cool. Mark's in the house. 4200 power. Did you get to take a look at the walk around of the header and stuff? Daniel, that's why I'm here. I'm here to read all the comments. I try to read and answer everything that I can on my YouTube channel. I go through every comment, and I like them and try to answer them if there are questions or whatever. Sometimes it's hard because they're asking me a question about a video that I posted, now a year ago. And so I might not remember what the part number is on the valve spring. But I go through all of that and try to answer everything. That's important to me. And if I get to be where I have 1 million subscribers and the channel blows up or whatever, I hope that I can keep doing that, because that's the important part. That's why I go to ask questions of guys like Boosted Lifestyle and Boosted Boys and all the guys that I follow. That when I watch it, I want some interaction, just like everybody else. Frostback, Gen 3, 4.8, VS7875, 4L80E, Terminator X. Should I run methanol injection kit? I like running an intercooler on everything, and then a water meth system would be in addition to that. The thing that I don't like about the water meth injection is the distribution in a long runner manifold. So if you have a Gen 3 4.8, you have a truck manifold on it, it's hard to get the water meth to be equal in all of the stuff. Steve wants to know, any heads are ported different than turbo head to be efficient? No, I don't think that they are. I think you try to make as much power as you can NA. I know that some guys will want to do them differently. Maybe they want more exhaust flow, but in the normal range that most of us are running, if you're building a Pro Mod motor, then you're probably going to want to do stuff differently. If you're building a motor that you want to make 1,000 horsepower or 1,200 or whatever, a ported head like a trick flow bolt-on 205 head for a 4.8 or a 5.3, or an airflow research, or lots of other guys' heads that work really well. If you bolt that onto your head, it makes more NA power. It's going to work real well under boost. The transmission is not to build 1,300 horsepower, so stock C6. Yeah, you're making way more power than all of the other stuff will work with. So the other guy's Atlas 2900 inline 4-cylinder, that would be cool too, as long as we can get it running and stuff. What are your reviews on tri-Y headers? I've tried tri-Y headers. and we tried the Shelby ones back in the day. And again, the tri-Y versus 4-to-1 thing has always been, oh, the tri-Ys make torque. And I don't see that that's the case. Tri-Y headers on a 4-cylinder seem to work really well on the Honda stuff. But again, when we ran the 4-to-1 versus tri-Y stuff and we could manipulate the header the way that we wanted, we could get them to do the same thing. Let me close this. These guys are running stuff on the chassis down. You need to tell them to be quiet and get off my lawn. So I think you can, if you configure the header, you can make the header do what you want, and it's not specifically a design thing. That being said, the NASCAR guys seem to want to run the tri-Y stuff, and that works really well for them. Maybe they found something in their tuning and their configurations that they're running where that works really well. But I think that that's like application specific. Small block Mopar valve angle, Edelbrock Performer RPM showing 18 degrees. Yeah, I don't know if the Edelbrock is different than stock or not, but my stream is delayed by like minutes. It's typical. I don't know how the connection is here at West Tech, but it's usually not great. But so there might be some lag, but that shouldn't be that kind of time delay though. Chris wants to know, is there a table or formula to figure exhaust dilution or intake charge from reversion due to the cam overlap on an NA engine? The problem with that, Chris, is that's going to change with RPM, because the amount of dilution that you get is going to be determined by how long those two valves are open. And at high speeds, they're not open very long. And I don't think that there is a formula to figure that. But I'm not the sharpest guy in the room, and I'm the only guy in the room. Lunar Outlaws Garage. How do you feel about the one UZ-FE? I have two at the house, and I'm putting into my Super NX. I think that they're good motors. I mean, they're good, like 300 horsepower motors. They're good little V8s. But I've never run one on the engine dyno. It would be kind of cool, but you know, I get a lot of guys tell me, oh, that's a good motor for boost. Well, every motor is a good motor for boost. If you start out with a 300 horsepower motor and you run 14.5 pounds, it becomes a 600 horsepower motor. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on whether you're running E85, you have good intercooling, you have a good tune, all of that stuff. But I think it's going to do exactly what you would expect a 300 horsepower motor to do. Now, ones that make more than that, obviously, are going to be multiplied by more than that. I still would like to run one because I think that they're, you know, like every motor, I think that they're cool. Which machines would I need for a complete engine work? There's a lot of them. I don't think you'd want to buy all of them because it's really, really expensive. So Aaron, stock valve angle is 18 degrees. Cool. So 18 degree already, it's a race head. That's why Mopars do so well, because they basically have the race valve angle that a small block Chevy does. Complete from start to finish machine work. You'd have to talk to a machinist about that, somebody that does all of that machine work. D White, I'm late to the party. Any mention of the hot parts manifolds? I've never heard of those. I've never seen them that I remember. Tim wants to know if all LA Mopar heads are 18 degree. Is the valve angle didn't change when they went from the LA to the Magnum? Okay, let's see. That's okay. We don't need that. Let's see. Yeah, Calvin's running 9s on a stock 4200 with. Does he have a different intake on it? Did he use the short runner intake on it when he ran 9s? He's not even running a fancy turbo. It doesn't take a fancy turbo, just it takes a turbo that will support that power level. And honestly, even at 19 pounds, because he's running so little timing, I don't think he's making a ton of power. I think he's got a good combination. It's hooking up, it's going, it's got a good 60, it's got a decent 60-foot time. It's got a turbo 400. It's got a fairly light vehicle. He's got all the things, and it's working really good. I think that there's a ton of like power left in that combination. How often do you use plastic gauge or micrometers? I've used both, and we obviously measure them when we're putting stuff together. So every time I build a motor, but we don't normally do that I don't measure that stuff when we're doing junkyard motors. Let's see, 6L63. I found a set of 706 heads I was putting on my LQ4. I'm going to port them myself and add a BTR Stage 2 truck cam and springs. Thanks for all the work. Good luck with the combo. It sounds like a good combo. The trick with yards is to find the old timers and spend a lot to start, and after a few years you'll get less expensive. I may or may not have pulled a good 440 for $300. Good, get me one. I need a 440. That's the link to the world record. The world record thing is really funny. People on the internet say that all the time, but to me, a world record is like when you go to Bonneville and you actually set an established record. When somebody goes on the internet and says, "Hey, I just made the most power of anybody with a green Grand Am 3400 single turbo with an automatic," that's not a world record. That's not recognized by anybody. But I think I know what Jeep thing that you're talking about, because I think that I watched that video, and they made a lot of power with that 4-liter, right? Is that the one that I'm thinking of? German, can you make a list of the best cam, heads, headers, springs, and extras for a 6-liter I'm starting to build soon? Just tell me how much power you want, and I'll tell you what parts you need to use. There is no best. Let's see. Where did I go to, man? Let's see. Nick, Richard has an Atlas to small block Chevy LS adapter plate. Yes, I did. That's because it came from Big Mark over at, is it EMS? Did I get that right, Mark? So if you want 4200 stuff, he's the guy to go to. I got the intake flange from Jerry. Thank you, Jerry, if you're watching or listening. When I come back, we're going to do some videos together. And the intake is already being made right now, so it's very cool. Mopar Black. Hey, Richard, a little birdie told me you're working on something with Uncle Tony. I like the two of you, but Tony does not play well with others. We've all seen what happens. I don't have anything going with Uncle Tony other than I'm testing the pin offset on the pistons with a Mopar that I'm getting from the wrecking yard. What about the China twin turbo kit for $1,500 on eBay? I haven't seen that, but with two turbos that will do 750 or 800, you can certainly do that. Are Johnson short travel lifters comparable to solid lifters? I'm looking to squeeze. Well, what kind of RPM do you want? The guys are running 8,500 with hydraulic roller lifters, so you can go there. Yeah, the 440 out of the RV. That's where they all seem to come from. I want as much power as I can without a turbo or supercharger. How about nitrous then? Yeah, Durham, guys can weld on the stock exhaust manifolds, because a lot of guys can't do what I did, where I run a Y pipe and just aim the manifolds forward and then run a Y, because I don't run any accessories. But if you have accessories on the motor, then that gets difficult. And so they need to re-aim the flanges on those. Or some guys weld dedicated flanges on those, or V-bands on them, which also works. I'm only here for the 3800 V6 stuff. I can take you for a walk over there and I can show you the V6. It's sitting on the floor right now. Yeah, Tim, Tony putting a slant 6 in a Miata. I don't understand that. It's big and long and heavy, and it's not ideal for what a Miata is all about. A K series swap in one of those would be would be good, but I don't understand that. But I like guys swapping weird stuff, and that's definitely weird. More 4.2 liter building, less talkie. I'm hoping to swap one in a 53 International pickup. That's cool. You know that this is the live feed, right? Where we talk about stuff. I still have a Whipple kit for a 5.3 Gen 4 sitting here, not doing me any good. Inland Empire Local. Those were good. We've run those. I ran that on a 4.8, and then we ran it on also a 383, I think, and it worked good on both of them. Yeah, Daniel, you chop them up, put 3-inch pipes on them, and they work good for turbos. A lot of guys are doing that stuff. That works good. Would it be too difficult to build a billet 4200 block? Yeah, it'd be difficult for me. What ended up happening with the L99? We're going to be doing some more of that. As a matter of fact, in the video that I'm posting that I just finished editing, I mentioned that we're going to do the 302 version out of that thing. But it lost. It got metal and destroyed the bearings. Some guy told me that 3.8 liter V6 heads in cam flow, he was talking about 400, 500 CFM. 400 to 500 CFM maybe total out of all of them. No. Or at least out of 2 of them. Those heads don't flow that much. Power 123, what's up? I received the crew shirt you sent. Nice. I'm glad you guys got that. Can we get a video for low RPM torque towing combination for L7 or LQ4 pump gas? So at low speed torque where it's going to rattle and you want to do it on pump gas. Yes, we're going to do something like that. The Drive Tribe MX-5 is a great idea, and that engine. Slant 6 in a Miata would be useful with a motor deck. Wow, shots fired. Yeah, the being tall on the Miata is difficult. If the top is down, it's all okay. Just like Magnum in that 308 Ferrari. Actually, anything in a Chevette is good. Australian V8 supercars run an equal length Y pipe with a length to produce torque. Can you compare it to an X pipe? I don't know. I'd have to look at their exhaust to see what you're talking about. What's the reasonable RPM limit for a stock bottom end 5.3 with BTR stage 2 cam, lifters and springs? The cam, especially the cam and the intake manifold, and then to some extent the heads also are going to limit where that thing makes power. Stage 2 cam, especially if it's a truck cam, is going to make peak power at less than 6,000 RPM. Do you think it would be beneficial to run twin turbos through a 142 blower on a 355 small block looking for 700 minimum horsepower? A single turbo will easily do that. Twins will easily do that. You don't need the blower. It's kind of in the way. It is cool if you want to do it because it's cool, but that would be the only reason that you're doing it. Which block and head setup are you running on the dyno currently? I don't have a motor on the dyno right now, but the 4200 is an 06, so it has all the stock 06 stuff. Bolting up to the dyno tomorrow. I assume you're talking about the 4200. Yeah, we're going to try to get it. I'm going to try to do it tonight. I mean, I'm going to try to get as much as I can done tonight. I want to see that 4200 built with higher RPM. Would bet it could be at the barrel level. Yeah, maybe so. It would be nice to be able to run more RPM, because especially if we get the head flow over 300 CFM and put cams in it, it's going to want to run there with a short runner manifold. Alvin, I wouldn't recommend the sloppy stage 3. I would put a stage 1 or a stage 2, probably a stage 1 in a 6-liter. And the GT45 is going to be a little small for the 6-liter because it's like a 700 horsepower turbo or 750 horsepower turbo. Probably more like 700 on a 6-liter because it's going to have really high back pressure. The 7875 is going to be a lot better choice for that. And the camshaft that you put in there is not going to change the power output. Yeah, Mike, I agree. It's always better to build something that's unloved, or that's where the whole other guys thing comes in, because it's, we got to do different stuff. I can't just build small block Chevys or LSs or even small block Fords, just all the time. That's why I went off on a modular phase for a long time and just did a bunch of modular stuff, and I ended up doing the book on it. And then I haven't run a 462 valve modular in years and years and years. Admiral's here. Yeah, I like Chevettes. I think that they're cool, and they're really cool with big motors in them. Stage 2 turbo cam, blow through carb, and carb intake. I've been limiting to 7,000 RPM, but need to get it on a dyno. Is the carb intake a single plane? Because it should be a single plane if you're running up in that RPM. Did you ever get a chance to check the flow numbers on the 7.4 liter Vortec heads? I didn't. I'll try to look those up. I don't know if I have the flow data here at West-Tech or not. I might have that at home. Richard, would you ever do a Jeep rod? You mean build a car? Probably not. I'm more into the motor stuff, but I do want to do a 4-liter Jeep engine. .8 torque cam, 7875 V2. Yes, that's a good combination. Sent the V8 supercar link to your Instagram for the Y-pipe question. Possible test. I don't, the test that they're doing, the exhaust that they're using is so that they can make that motor work, and they can also fit it in that chassis. It's not because it's the absolute best exhaust. I can look at doing exhaust tests, but I don't think a supercar V8, an Australian V8 supercar, is really the ideal thing, because nobody's going to use that over here. Rex, thank you very much. What's going on here? What heads and cam would you pick out of your rec? Basically tested almost the same motor, 496 rec port, yes, but I'm going to use either a 265, 290, or 300 oval port head for turbo or ProCharge solid cam. I would pick a 290 or a 300. Either one of those will work. The 265 works good if you're gonna, and it can make a lot of power. But if you have a 496 and you put a 290 or a 300 on it with a good camshaft in it, it's going to make a lot of NA power. And then when you add boost to it, it's just going to make even more. You won't lose anything, I don't think, on the 300 or the 290 compared to the 265. So it doesn't sound like you're real concerned with, oh no, I lost foot-pounds of torque at 2,500 for drivability. Cadillac was in the Gremlin, I think. Yeah, the Jeep motor is on the list the same way that the 300 Ford is on the list. I like those 6-cylinders. They're kind of cool. Yeah, Durham, my autograph is more famous than I know. I know you're not talking to me, because all my autograph does is bring the value of down of whatever I put it on. Chris wants to know, Richard, what are your thoughts on short duration high lift cams? I'm talking NA applications, downside to the high lift under partial throttle. It's not a, I don't think you're like a partial throttle thing is not the thing that I would be looking at. It's actually RPM. A short duration camshaft with high lift has a lot of ramp rate, and so it has inherent instability at high RPM. That's why they combine higher lift with longer duration so that you can have a more stable ramp rate, and then it will run at RPM where the duration is being taken advantage of, and obviously the lift too. So that would be my problem with high lift stuff, short duration stuff. Boosted Cleveland. I don't have any more Clevelands. I'd have to find one. Flexall, I'm getting 275 horsepower at the wheels and 390 foot-pounds on my built stroker EFI. What motor is that, Flexall? There's so many questions and stuff I need to look back on. Do you think Cadillac Ctsb motors are reliable for drifting? Yes. How high would you rev a B-head NA build? Would you just send it to the moon and go like 12,000? I don't know about that RPM. I know Mahovitz runs his at 9,500 or something, but I don't know about the NA stuff going beyond that. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if there are problems with the chain length on those, if that runs into an issue. I honestly don't know about 12,000 RPM stuff. The Buick 3800 Big Bang stuff, yeah, we are going to do that. Trevor, they did the reverse flow cooling because it was better as a hedge against detonation. Yeah, Julius, 8,000 seems to not be a problem at all with the mod motors. We run a lot of the stock stuff to that. I mean, even stuff from wrecking yards with good heads and cams on the right intake manifold, we've run them to 8,000. I don't know, obviously that's not racing them, so for doing it for long periods of time, but they seem to be fine there. Let's see. Oh, it's been a long time. It's been an hour and 18 minutes. What are we on? What are we doing this long for, man? Why don't you guys tell me? The Black Opal, Mark is saying that the Black Opal ran the stock Atlas valve train with springs to 9,100 at Bonneville. So, Mark, what did they do to the dampener on that? Did they have ATI build one, or did they use that other one that you were talking about? How did they get past this death point of 6,200 RPM? It's easily possible. You guys are talking about the 5-liter supercar engines. it's easy for them to make the power that they make. Not easy, but it's certainly possible with enough cylinder head flow and the right cam timing and the right induction system. Those kinds of numbers are obviously possible. And it's not, if you take a look at what drag race guys do and what the NASCAR guys did, the supercar stuff is certainly to be expected to be in that power range, given professional engine builders and the things that they're using them on. Can you get boost at low RPM and not worrying about max output? You can if you size the turbo right. Tim, what did they limit the Coyotes to engine speed in Grand Am? I've been away from that for a while. I don't really have an opinion on the 7.3 liter Ford because I've never run one. They look like they're cool, and what Brian and Evan did, the story that Evan did on the stuff that Brian is doing is pretty impressive. I mean, they're making good power, but they're big motors, and you get head flow, and you get cam timing, and you get boost. And you know, the thing is, if you have a 400 horsepower motor and you add enough boost, it's pretty easy to get to really big power levels. And if you have a 500 or 600 or 700 horsepower NA motor and you put boost to it, then really big things happen. Gregory, what's up? I want to run low 20-ish pounds of boost, air-to-air intercooler, and meth injection. Have 88-pound injectors, 383 small block. Thought on 91 versus 85. I definitely would do 20 pounds on E85 and not on 91. 91, 20 pounds on 91 kind of scares me. And if you were able to do it, you'd have to do it on like negative timing values or single digit timing values. And it's just not a good combination, I don't think. Nick wants to see a 6.2 and 6.5 Detroit diesel video. We don't run diesels on this engine dyno though, so I won't be doing diesel stuff. Chris, I don't have any experience with HP tuners. Maybe ask some of the other guys on there. That's why I hate the countermeasures that the factory stuff does by shutting the throttle and changing timing and all of that stuff. Yeah, I think I would use it's since you can get an L83 motor from the wrecking yard, I would combine the LT heads with an LT block. Yeah, you can make turbos be very responsive. You can make them come on at whatever RPM you want. I mean, if you look at some of the factory stuff, Audi and VW, they have full boost at 1800 RPM. So you can make that happen with turbo sizing and the other things going on with the motor, intake manifold and cylinder head flow and cam timing, especially with variable cam timing. You can make all of that happen, but do you want that? Let's see. Mark says they ran a fluid dampener and gear the car and trans to 7400. Once above 7400, the harmonics will quiet out to an acceptable level. The dual mass race dampener from BHJ. Okay. So just the key is to rev through it. And I'd like to do that. When I run when I run the 4200 and do the preliminary testing with mildly ported head and reground cams and the adjustable intake manifold, I'd like to find out where it wants to make power, and I'd like to go past this resonance frequency that's problematic, even if I have to get another dampener, because then I want to see if we really did something and made, you know, into the 4-digit power level stuff. That would be interesting. Then do it with forged internals and all of the stuff that's necessary to really put the screws to it. All right, Joyce, get back to work. LQ4 with a 4.8 crank D-stroker would be cool to see. Take a look at the video that's already up. I didn't do it with an LQ4. I did it with an LS3 block, but we put the 4.8 crank in it and revved it to 8,000. It's better than a fluid dampener. The race dampener came along after they stopped racing. Okay. Thank you for your time. Would you do the big bang with fuel pump 91? No, we won't do a big bang with 91 because you can't make power with 91. You have to keep turning the timing down so you don't get detonation. So that's not a good idea. Yeah, if you look at the sprint car stuff is really impressive, as much or more so than the NASCAR stuff, because they run on, they can run those on alcohol. They run stack injection on them. They make a lot of power. I mean, they make like 950. Those things are crazy. Yeah, John Causey knows how to make power. I mean, a 5-liter making 500 horsepower is just 100 horsepower per liter. That's what a stock B16A Honda does. So that's not a magic number. That's not, you know, it takes a little bit of work, but it's certainly possible. What size cheap single turbo would you use on a Ford 460 for 900 plus horsepower? Use the Summit S475 or a 7875 Gen 2 from VS Racing. Any of those 75 or 76 millimeter size turbos will work. What about an LSX 454 D-stroke with a 4.8 crank? What is the bore size on a 454? I thought that they did that with stroke. Is that a 4125 like an LS3, or I mean like an LS7? Then yeah, you could do that. You can go up in bore size, but de-stroking it is just going to take power away. Jeff, have a good night. Have you ever done any Powerdyne stuff? Yeah, I ran lots of Powerdyne superchargers back in the day. Let's see. I can tell you the 4200 with a 110 VP and 12 PSI makes 498 wheel horsepower. That's good. That's encouraging. Is an M112 on a draw through too small for a 351 Cleveland with stock 2V head, stock headers? No, that the M112 is like, you know, is a maybe 500 or 600 horsepower supercharger. Chris, 233 is decent enough size camshaft that you can run lift on that. Josh wants to know, I have an 05 Yukon Denali LQ4 four-wheel drive. What header should I run? You should put long tube headers on it, an 1 5/8 or an 1 3/4. You should do a compression ratio comparison for max power on boost with pump gas. I won't ever do max power and pump gas together. That's not a thing. we don't have any way to, we don't have knock detection, so there's no way to know what the maximum power is on pump gas until you break something, and we're not going to do that. What is your all-time favorite engine to turbocharge? All of them need boost. I am every bit as excited when we were running the Chevy Sprint Turbo, the inline, the 3-cylinder that was rated at 70 horsepower under boost, where we would get like 1 or 2 horsepower per pound of boost that we would gain from each pound. You know, I was excited about the changes that we were making on that, as I am about a Turbo LS or a Cleveland or anything else that we run boost on. All of it's good. And this 4200, I'm real excited because this is a new one, so this will be cool. Grillin 6.2 VS Racing 80mm. Looking for 800 wheel horsepower. That's not a problem. 31 by 12 by 3 intercooler be sufficient. 4-inch is better. I would wonder about the flow on that, but 800 shouldn't be a problem. Josh wants to know what brand of long tube. I don't know brands because I don't know chassis fitment. So you'll have to find that out. But when we did the test of the cheap headers, they work just as well as the expensive stuff. So I would put those on. George, I'll be excited to see what the change in spool rate is with changing the cam timing. We went through a little bit of that with the K24 also. Uh, 4-inch bore and keep the 4.8. Well, you need shadow ops. What you need is they made 3-inch cranks. They made 3-inch Ellis cranks back when they were doing the Daytona prototype stuff. So Bryant or Kellogg or those guys had 3-inch LS cranks. So you could make out of a 6-liter block, if you put a 3-inch crank in it, you could make a DZ302. But again, why would you? The only reason that guys ran 3-inch cranks is because they were limited in 5-liter displacement, and that turned out to be the best combination. Having a 4-inch bore allowed the head to flow and them to make the power that they were allowed to make, basically with restrictors and stuff. So that was the best combination for them, but that's not a good combination for the street, though. I don't have the math in front of me on the Walboro 450 to find out. The Bosch 210s will make more power than the Walboro, than a single 450 Walboro will make on the 85. The nice thing is, Ben, having that big of an ejector allows you to run less pressure, less fuel pressure, and that will help the flow rate of the pump. And so they're talking about Pontiac blocks being either large journal or small journal. And also the earlier ones, like the one that I have, was different as well. Well, you wouldn't have to mill the block to 4 inches. You just get a 6-liter block. A 6-liter block already has a 4-inch bore. And then you just put a custom crank in it. But you could do a 4.8 crank because they're cheap. again, we've done that, and all it does is just make less power than having the standard stroke crank, or even better, a 4-inch stroke crank. Every fuel pump, whether it's a high pressure pump or not, will flow more fuel at a lower pressure. That's how pumps work. How much would a dynoed engine cost from you built? I don't really do that. They say that if we reduce engine friction, it will last longer. That's I don't know that that's totally true. Where are you reducing friction? Are you reducing friction between the piston and the wall, between the ring and the wall, between the bearing surface? Where are you reducing friction? Michael, how come nobody cares about your setup? So you're doing coatings to reduce frictions. The guys from NASCAR do that. They do it. They do a DLC coating on their pins, and they do coatings on the top. They do coat, and a lot of people do anti-scuff coatings and for the skirts, and all that stuff is good. Michael, why does nobody care about your 4-liter? Oh, your 4.3? I like 4.3s. I have videos up on the 4.3. Obviously, I'm a 4.3 guy. I would like to do a Vortec 8.1 video, but I don't have the motor yet. An L35 or an LU3. I talked to Brian about doing some, more modern V6 stuff, and we might be doing some of that. Coleman, I don't know that an aluminum 5.3 is going to be cheaper than a 6-liter. And then to have it bored is going to cost you more money, and then you're just ruining the aluminum 5.3. You just get a 6-liter block. Yeah, guys have asked about the V10 shootout. Both of those are hard to find. I've seen more of the mod motor V10s in the wrecking yards, but not very many Dodges though. I don't have a rotary motor right now, and I've never ever seen one in a wrecking yard. I was told that, George, that there are 2 different heads for the 4200. Oh, Jason, good. I'm glad you got your stuff. I don't have merchandise yet. I had a couple that I found that I offered up. I had some books that I found, some Hemi and LS books, and then that I signed and made them less valuable. And a couple of our racing shirts from back when I was running U.S. touring car. Pablo, the aluminum 5.3s you can bore. The 6.2 and the 6.0, the L and the 5.7, the LS1, LS2, and LS3, you cannot do that. But on the 5.3 stuff, you can. So George is saying that the LT4 is better than the LS. Cameron, I haven't tried pulling the head off yet. We're going to try to run it first before we do that. And we know that even if we break some bolts, I have head studs for it, so that's not a big deal. For street racing, I wouldn't be as concerned about the 4L80 about having an overdrive if you're not driving it around a lot. Aaron, I have my original 5-liter Mustang still. It's an 88 notch that I bought new in November or just September, November, like October, November, I think, of 87. So I still have that car. I don't have any of the race cars though. I haven't run any of the LT base 4.3s yet. I would like to though. I think that they're cool. Yeah, there's Nick is saying a Gen 4 aluminum 5.3 LH6 or L33 will be plenty of power for a stock bottom end. You can make an insane amount of power without having to bore that motor, so I don't know why you would. Does anybody out there have a I need a 6-liter or 6.2 liter. A short block is fine, or a long block, something that's preferably running. It could be stock, whatever it is. If anybody else has anything, send me an email. I'll put my email address before I go. I got to get going and get back to work. W16. So if you have something, send me an email. No, I need an LS3, an L92, an L76 or whatever, any kind of 6-liter or 6.2 liter aluminum motor, preferably. It could be a short block, but a long block is fine as well. Any of those. So if anybody has anything that they pulled out recently that they want to get rid of, let me know. I need to buy one. So I have to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. Hopefully we'll have some stuff later on. I hope I didn't turn this off. Thank you guys for showing up, man. I'll see you later.